I was on my fourth attempt trying to find a therapist online because I thought something was wrong with me. At this point in my life, I was overwhelmed, I was isolated and carrying a lot of things that I had no business holding. And I was just completely disconnected from the person that I thought I was. But instead of finding a therapist, I found numerology. And while it did not magically fix my life in one shot, it did become one of the first tools that helped me understand myself beyond the version of me created through survival mode. And today, I'm going to break down 7 key things numerology helped me recognize about myself. When I accidentally discovered numerology, I was in a really dark place. And I want to paint a picture of my reality at the time, but I want to make sure I give a trigger warning for those who need it. At this time, I was a first-time mom, dealing with my postpartum depression, isolated from friends and family, and I was in a domestically abusive relationship with my child's father. I was looking like a walking skeleton. Like you could tell I was not okay. And for a very long time, I had normalized my experiences by convincing myself that I deserved it. I kept looping through thoughts about how I wasn't strong enough to leave, strong enough to raise our child by myself, or even strong enough to handle the backlash that would come if I tried to walk away. I genuinely believed I was the only one at fault. And because I believed that, I stayed quiet. I would over-explain myself. I would fawn, I would try to keep the peace before anything got a little bit escalated. It didn't work, by the way. It just honestly made things worse, but I see that these internal narratives that I had about myself, it just became louder through him. The guilt, the shame, the fear, the feeling of being a burden. It was all echoed back to me through our relationship. And prior to numerology, I didn't realize I was spiraling through layers of conditioning and survival mode. I just thought this was life, like this was just my life. I thought this was love. Looking back now, I can see what I was carrying as far as for responsibilities that were not my own. Because growing up, I was conditioned to be the one who makes it, the one who saves my mother from her addiction, the peacemaker, the fixer. I learned very early that keeping people emotionally stable mattered more than my own emotional safety. Keeping people emotionally steady was my safety at that time. And doing this, it got me praise. And that praise became what I understood as love. I ended up attaching their validation for the things that I did to my self-worth. But then at the same time, there was also a part of me that it always felt to pull towards things like creativity, music, art, any form of self-expression. But these parts of me were constantly treated like hobbies, passion projects. It was just pushed to the side instead of being something that was meaningful and worthy of pursuit. So just like anybody else in my situation would do, I did my best to try to balance both versions of myself. I was the one that everyone needed me to be, as well as holding the version of myself, sometimes secretly, for the one that I wanted to become. And this balance wasn't balancing, and man, it came to a complete halt when my mother passed away. Because when she passed, I felt like a version of myself got buried with her. I had carried so much guilt around her death. I somehow managed to convince myself that had I worked harder, graduated sooner, made better decisions, maybe things would have been different. Maybe I could have saved her. And that messed me up. Because when I later find myself in a relationship where I'm once again emotionally responsible for someone else's moods, reactions, and stability, it just felt familiar. And that familiarity nearly destroyed me. Now, I'm not going to belabor too much of that whole experience, but I do want to explain that at this point, I just wanted somebody to fix me. I wanted somebody to fix us. I wanted somebody to tell me what was wrong and how to make everything stop hurting. I was looking for a savior. So I searched for therapy. I went through many pages on Google finding 3 different therapists. And I'm not discounting therapy, but man, my experiences with those 3 therapists, it was just not hitting at the time. Like something always felt off. And low-key, when I sit here to think about it, I believe it was because my intentions behind searching for help wasn't truly for self-understanding. I was just looking for a way to save a relationship that was already emotionally dead. And maybe my spirit guides, the creator of all creation, God, source, whatever, higher power you name it as, intervened because it saw that I just wanted an external solution for an internal collapse. So on my 4th attempt finding a therapist, using the same keywords that I had for the first 3 results, I see that something's a little different. On the first listing, it wasn't a listing of a therapist, it was actually a link to a page, a landing page with a 45-minute presentation from this man, I don't even remember his name, God forgive me. Hopefully one day his name will recollect in my mind, but he talked about numerology and how it helped him understand himself and reconnect him with his family and his joy for life. And my spirit resonated with what he was saying. I felt inclined to watch the whole thing, so I did. He spoke on what I experienced emotionally, of how he felt lost and disconnected and emotionally off course. Our situations were different, but emotionally we were on the same boat. And for the first time in a really long time, something in me felt seen. At the end of the presentation, it directed me to a website called numerologist.com where I entered my information and I received my 3 core numbers. I highly suggest if you take the time to go and actually experience what I did, definitely check it out, because I tell you, when the AI voice started reading back my results, I was shooketh. Like, it spoke about my intuition, my artistic expression, my sensitivity, and feeling connected to something bigger than myself. It hit me so hard because these were all the things that I already knew deep down, but had either dismissed, suppressed, or was taught to minimize. And for the first time in a really long time, I felt like I was being reflected back to myself instead of corrected. And I don't know if any of you guys have ever felt that way before, but it's a really powerful and empowering feeling, because it reminded me that creativity is a part of me. It's not something random, it's not something childish or distracting. It was actually part of who I was and how I'm meant to process the world that I live in. And that realization just planted a seed for me. Numerology gave me something I didn't realize I was missing, which was permission. Permission to explore myself without shame. Permission to question the narratives that I inherited. Permission to be curious about who I was outside of survival mode. And once when that rabbit hole opened up, I went deep. I started learning everything I could about numerology, spirituality, healing, shadow work, emotional patterns. I even eventually started studying astrology and human design too. But what mattered most was that I finally stopped searching only for ways to fix my external life. I actually started to try to understand who was Liz. And that shift changed everything. As I kept learning, I started recognizing patterns I couldn't see before. I began understanding concepts like the shadowed self, terms like self-abandonment, emotional conditioning, projection, and energetic boundaries. I saw how often I gave my power away because I didn't trust my own internal voice. Somewhere along the way, I made everyone else the authority on who I was because I had been conditioned to believe that my instincts and emotions and desires were somehow wrong. What landed for me about numerology was that it reflected back the quieter voice that I had, the one that was buried underneath the fear, the guilt. It showed me the voice that I dimmed was actually the one who knew what the heck was up. You know what I'm saying? Numerology became one of the catalysts for my spiritual awakening, not because it magically solved any of my problems, but because it helped me reconnect with myself, and it gave me language to things I didn't know how to articulate but always felt. And over time, that self-recognition became an anchor for me. Numerology helped me to understand why creativity kept calling me, why I was so sensitive, and how it's not a weakness but actually a superpower. It helped me to see why I kept abandoning myself, trying to become what everybody else needed. And more than anything, it reminded me that underneath all that conditioning and confusion, the real version of me was always there waiting to bloom. It wasn't something that I had to cultivate, but just something that I had to let grow. Hopefully, this gave you a clearer understanding of how numerology helped me. It helped me become aware of my inner conflict, recognize burdens I was carrying. It helped me find clarity through confusion. It helped me reconnect with my emotional truth and gave me permission to explore who I really am, and ultimately began the process of self-recognition and awakening. And I share this with you because if you find yourself anywhere in my story, I not only offer you numerology as a tool, but I also ask this question. What if there was never something wrong with you? What if you just lost connection to yourself?